right, welcome back to the In My Beach Boys Room podcast. I am Adam Schreiner. I am here with Matthew Hartz, and today we are talking about 1973, that time period, as well as the Holland album and the In Concert album. We'll get into that here shortly. Let's just do our silly little social media stuff. Facebook, you can look up Matthew Hartz. He's, what are you, holding a banjo or something?
Yeah.
Holding a banjo. He posts a lot of the videos, covers that we do, that he does.
We do.
Yeah.
Those wouldn't be anything without you. So
any of the covers, if you want to be updated on that, you can follow him on Facebook. We also have...
I need to start putting some of that stuff on Instagram too.
Yeah,
but I kind of don't know.
We're just
how
the
to
worst.
do that.
I mean, I should know. I do know. I just don't want to. It's terrible. But the other stuff is Matthew Hart's Music on Instagram. You can look up Matthew Hart's Music on YouTube to see all these videos, all these covers that he's doing, and also see the visuals that we have going on behind us. And then we have Twitter, Matthew_Hartz. And so
I've never even seen that. So.
Yeah, it's our weakest of our really weak social campaign. I just, that's all right. Well, let's get into this thing then. Okay, so we're going to get into Holland and then the concert album, right?
In concert, yeah, that's the music we're going to cover this episode.
Okay, so then...
We already got into the making of Holland.
Yeah, and so if we might repeat a little bit from the end of the last episode, and I might ask questions because maybe I wasn't paying attention, maybe I was, I don't know, maybe I forgot. But let's just get started on where we're at in the timeline here with Holland.
Well, I think I was just thinking about this, and it's good to give the context of, okay, end of last episode, the Beach Boys are getting back from Holland after being there for 6 months, working on the stuff. They still got a little bit to do. They get back with the material. The record company rejects it for lack of a single. Van Dyke Park says, hey, I got this song, Ceylon Sailor, that I've been working on, or that I have from a couple of years ago. And so that's the end of 1972.
Okay.
So now we're
getting into 73.
Yes, well, when they got back, which I think they got back in October or November, they did some extra work getting stuff ready, and I guess Ceylon Sailor too. But Holland's released early in the year, in January.
Okay.
Does real well again.
Nice.
Actually does better than Carl and the Passions, not quite as good as Surf's Up. It actually, the U.S. is number 36. UK was 21.
Okay.
So that's still a good showing.
Yeah, definitely.
And then the Ceylon Sailor single, I think, was released in February.
Okay, they released the album first and then released the single?
Was
that normal?
Depends sometimes,
yeah.
But in the 60s, it was generally a single was going to
hype
precede
the album, right?
Yeah. But sometimes singles weren't even put on the albums, on Beach Boy albums or like Beatle albums even, sometimes single releases were just independent.
Just the little, what are those, 45s?
45s, yeah. So anyway, Ceylon Sailor comes out in February. It goes to number 79, which is good, for a single. But what's cool, and we got to fast forward a couple of years, in 75, they chose to release it again, the same thing. And it went to number 49, but that was after the success of Endless Summer and everything like that. So that's Ceylon Sailor has kind of an odd history as a single. It was released once in 73 and once in 75.
Yeah.
And so, but it was that song is, that to me, that epitomizes early 70s brown Chevy van driving, or to me that record is a real 70s record made for like FM radio.
The Holland record itself, or the
Ceylon Sailor.
That's funny,
really, and even some of the stuff on Holland.
Well, and it's funny that you say that, because in my notes I wrote that, like, where it just the certain songs just feel like that.
Oh yeah,
but we'll get into that.
It's very much a record of its time, but that. And having, I guess what Carl probably tried singing in the studio first, and then Dennis, I guess, gave it a shot. I've never heard any of those attempts on bootlegs or anything like that. But Blondie was just kind of asked to sing it as a, hey, you give it a shot, the new Beach Boy.
Uh-huh.
And so it's Blondie on the...
That was one of my questions that I had, was who's singing, because I didn't recognize the voice. Had Blondie's sung on any other songs?
Well, on the record, on the tunes on Carl and the Passions.
Right, yeah.
And
that's Blondie, like on that, that one that I really liked with that.
Here She Comes.
Here She Comes. That's Blondie on that one.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. And so, and that's part of the magic of that record. If you look at it, there's that 1972 footage of, I guess they're not doing Sail on Sailor, but that's a good visual to put with Blondie singing lead with the Beach Boys. That was at London in 72, and they were doing a big show at the Crystal Palace. We talked about it last episode, and Elton John was there. And
and they have footage of that.
And Blondie singing Wild Honey on it.
Oh, nice. Okay.
But that was definitely a hip element to the whole thing of having Blondie be the lead singer on that particular tune, and definitely gave it, if you're the guy listening to the radio in the early 1970s and that comes on, are you thinking Beach Boys?
Yeah, probably not.
Yeah,
probably not.
So just a great rockin' tune.
Oh yeah.
And I love the way that it starts in concert, but we'll get to that later too. So you had those significant pieces of music are released. We already talked all about Holland and what happened with it. So after you have all the success of everything since Surf's Up, and then, Holland was a bit of a debacle money-wise.
Yeah.
They didn't make like Carl said in the aftermath, he says, money-wise it wasn't a good move, but we got some good music out of it.
Right.
And they generally had an amazing amount of luck, or I shouldn't say, just good fortune and good movement with Jack Riley as their manager and steering them in these directions. Although I know it wasn't all roses, and Bruce had his big kind of beef with Jack, and some of the other guys I'm sure did too. But
okay,
Carl,
sorry, remind me though. Bruce is gone for this.
Oh
right?
yeah, Bruce is left in that last episode.
And you did talk about how like he didn't really leave, but so
he was still around,
right?
But he wasn't, he was doing other things.
Sure, but and I just can't. I'm sorry, the things are bleeding together for me. Bruce is not involved in Holland at all?
No.
Okay.
No, Bruce does not go to Holland, and through the next few years until 78, about, what happens is Bruce will occasionally play with a show with him, or he'll come in and sing on a record every once in a while.
Guest appearance.
Yeah, just things like that.
Okay.
But definitely apart from the Beach Boys, doing his own things and other projects.
Okay.
So anyway, Carl, I guess they were already back in L.A., right? But Riley had stayed in Holland.
After everybody came back?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
He stayed there, and he wanted to kind of, I guess, manage the Beach Boys from there. And
look, they're doing remote work before remote work's even a thing. Look at that.
Yeah, well, so... Yeah, and I don't know how efficient it was at all.
Yeah, back then, I don't know how it could
Carl flew back and let him go, fired him.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Carl flew back to Holland to fire him.
Mm-hmm. Carl was usually the guy that was, he made, for as soft of a heart as he had and how compassionate he was, also known as the guy that was kind of the... he knew when to close the deal.
Business is business.
Business is business, and I don't know if it was with Riley or who one of the managers. He prefaced the conversation before firing them by saying, "I just want to say you might be going through a period of some discomfort through the next part of our, so diplomatically and
So Jack gets fired in 73,
mm-hmm.
and Jack was brought on in 70. Is that what that was?
Yeah, right around
So he was
around when Sunflower was released. He didn't have anything to do with Sunflower, but he loved it, and that's when he met Brian at the Radiant Radish.
So he had about a 3-year run with them here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and boy, looking back at that time period, it was from the Feel Flow set and everything, just a bunch of amazing music was made during that time, and I really do think some of the directions he steered them in were ultimately the good ways for them to go.
Sure.
It definitely wouldn't have, I don't know how hip he would have been to the Beach Boys turning into the jukebox band that they kind of did after the hits became so popular again. And, he was really pushing the new music, trying to get them to create more, trying to get them to move forward. And so maybe, a little bit of that might have been part of the consideration too. But
there wasn't any one thing that was the cause of the firing?
No, I know that, one of the dig up the dirt on the Beach Boys books. This was written by a guy named Stephen Gaines way back, one of the first books to come out, but it was called Heroes and Villains. And it did a really good job of digging up all the nasty crap about all the interrelationships and all the things with the managers. And
it was true?
I would choose
true stuff?
some of the stuff, I guess, but I think some of the stuff was
pretty
personal.
Oh.
Pretty personal that were personal things that were exposed in courts and things like that. And so it's like there's some personal stuff about Riley that I don't really know a whole bunch about, but I don't feel like I'm qualified to really speak on it too much. I just knew that there were all kinds of little reasons that Riley might have been let go.
Okay. All right. Okay. Sorry.
So Mike's brother, Steve Love, takes over basically as manager.
Okay.
Now,
Had Steve had any involvement before? I don't.
He might have been doing some stuff a little before this, and maybe been being groomed for the position even too.
Okay.
But not. Mike's brothers come into this Beach Boys story, but they don't come in till about now. And Mike's other brother comes in.
All right.
Because he was one of Brian's first keepers when they tried to get Brian back on track.
Got it. Okay.
And so anyway, but Steve, and I think Mike's the oldest brother, and maybe Steve's the next, but he took over management in 1973. So you get a brother coming in to manage the group. In June of this year, to me, this is a big pivotal moment, not only in the Beach Boys, but also in Brian's life and mental health. And Murray dies.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Murray dies of a heart attack at 56 years old.
Wow. That's pretty young.
That's 4 years away for me.
Yeah, that's pretty young.
Yeah, I don't think he was taking as good a care of himself.
Yeah.
Well, he had a heart. I think he had a heart attack before, and he was on. They had people used to carry around nitroglycerin pills for when they'd have heart trouble. And
right. Yeah.
He had. I knew that he was doing that, and when he died, actually, Audrey and he weren't living together and hadn't been for a few years, but she still visited him, and maybe at this point in his life, she was maybe coming over to visit him every morning, and she went over there to visit and sat in the kitchen waiting for him to get up, and he never came out, and then he did, and then he went back to use the restroom, and he had this but Audrey was there when he had the heart attack, and she went outside and called the police and blah blah blah. That's the story,
that whole
of
thing, yep.
Murray passing away. Brian and Dennis, they didn't go to the funeral.
Interesting.
And that, I guess Carl was pretty pissed. But Audrey in an interview after that, it was, I think, one of the famous things in 76, maybe in Rolling Stone, and she said she knew that. She said Carl was really upset, but she also understood why Brian didn't go, and it was. He ended up, Brian took Diane, Marilyn's sister, part of American Spring, and he went to New York. In April, before Murray passes away, the last Spring single got released for that era, and it was not on the album that had been released the prior year, but it was Shying Away.
Right. I remember Shying Away.
Yeah, and
that was a good song. Good.
I love that tune.
Good song.
It's just amazing. And so Murray passes away in June. Brian's reaction was to The Hermit, fly to New York with Diane and kind of go on there's a radio interview you can find on the internet from when he does that, but he did a few radio interviews just promoting that Shine Away single, I think is what it was. But the conversations would come up, or the conversation would steer toward Murray and his recent death, because the interviewer knew that had happened, and I think Brian even kind of said, talked about it more than he had planned about. But one of the things I remember a quote I remember is, "It's making a man out of me."
Oh, yeah.
Which this is actually really the point when the whole early 70s period is a recluse sort of period for him. But this is where we get into kind of the famous going to bed deal.
This is the start of that?
Yeah. And so when they get back from Holland and Murray dies, for all of the "it's making a man out of me," I think it also severely depressed him. We talk about the just so many different facets to the relationship between the Wilson brothers and their dad, and how complicated it had to have been. But I know that, maybe there was a little bit of relief, but I also know that there was probably real sadness too.
Sure, absolutely, yeah.
And I just think of what the Beach Boys had only been going since 1961. That's only 12 years.
Right.
Think about that now, and this albatross around their neck, which, especially through the 60s, he was a constant thing, a burden that they had to feel like, Brian had to kick him out of the studio, or the other guys knew he was a negative influence, or, or had to put up with him or anything. Well, you don't got to put up with him anymore.
Yeah.
And so that must have been, relieving in some ways, but I'm sure that the three boys, their father was gone, no matter what their relationship was with him.
Yeah, still your father.
Yeah, and Mike's Uncle Murray, even though they might not have been close.
Yeah, definitely.
So huge deal.
Yeah, huge moment in the timeline here. Yeah,
right.
For sure.
So things get pretty inactive for Brian. Not a lot going on in Beach Boy world other than they're playing concerts, and through when they got back from Holland, I think in 72, and they started a winter tour then. Carl had all those shows recorded. The same engineer that did Stephen Moffat did most of the recording for this. Carl had him record some shows in late 72, but then also in the 73 tour, he had him record some shows. And so Carl took the material from those recorded shows, and I think the concert album is released in November, but it's taken from various shows from 72 to 73. And Carl put together an album that, to me, has a really nice mix of some of the new music and some of the great old tunes, even some tunes that you just wouldn't expect to hear, like Surfin' USA is so, and but it's just I love the way that I love this band that they have touring within it. It's worth mentioning Ed Carter on bass.
Oh, the bass line in this album is.
Carl chose to emphasize that, but Ed Carter's just one of my favorite musicians in Beach Boy history, and that's why I was so excited to see that he was actually playing one of those shows just a week ago
recently,
or so,
right?
with Al and Carney and Wendy. But that to me is a magic part of this whole In Concert album, is his bass playing on there.
I mean, I have that written all over my notes on multiple songs, like the bass line.
Yeah, and what's cool, another thing is, Carl, it's one thing to have the bass playing be great as it is, but Carl must have, said, man, I'm really going to bring this out on here, because it really makes it feel like that concert that you're at.
Okay, so like with Help Me Rhonda, like are they playing Help Me Rhonda like? Because this version of Help Me Rhonda it's different. It's like a cool live version.
Right. Well, in 1970, they played the Fillmore East in New York with the Grateful Dead, and it is the first time I know of that they kind of debuted this new, what I call bluesier rock, hard rock shuffle.
Yeah.
Help Me Rhonda, and they kept it going that way for a few years.
Okay, because you can even tell when in the audience doesn't know that it's Help Me Rhonda. You can tell.
No, and I
didn't know.
Carl, or I think that Carl's playing that guitar that it's got a drop D tuning on it, and he tunes it right before the song. He doesn't get it quite in, but that's kind of the magic of the early '70s anyway. It's just like there's a little bit of out of tuneness to the whole thing. But this was in the age before electronic tuners, and everybody was using their ears and doing things on the fly and trying to do it quickly. But yeah, that's always I had this album early. It was picked it up at an Osco's Drug in Twin Falls. I begged and begged for it forever, but the back of it doesn't list all the songs. And I remember Mom saying, well, Matthew, it doesn't say what all songs are on the inside of it. It just it lists some of them, and it says plus 10 more. But it was also the pictures along the bottom of the back of the In Concert album. I don't have it here, but I was really young when I saw that, and there's Carl Wilson and there's Dennis Wilson, and where's Brian Wilson? And here's Ricky Fattar and Blondie Chat and Mike Love and Al Jardine. It was just, the whole thing was, for that time period when I got that album, I had none of that context,
right.
But the album resonated with me immediately, even at a very young age, and I knew that Help Me Rhonda was, oh, that's different.
Yeah.
Even I just, and we probably should go through some of the tracks.
We probably should just
Holland.
Let's just go. That's a little backwards than we planned, but since we're here, let's just talk about the In Concert album first anyway.
Okay.
Let's just talk about it since we're here.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we have, obviously, let's just, anything else about Help Me Rhonda. I just thought that was a really cool live version of that song. That's one of those ones where it's like, you go to a show and it's so different than the actual recording, but it's still like this awesome just jam.
You want to know what else is really cool about this is I have live recordings of Carl singing the lead. He sang the lead a lot, so Al would not sing the lead on the song that he famously sang on in 1965. Sometimes Dennis is singing the lead in live, so they just kind of just... it's kind of a loose jam on Help Me Rhonda. It's just I love the versions with Al singing, especially this one, but the ones with Carl and Dennis singing the lead, you really don't expect that. And
Yeah.
So we actually do need to go back to Holland.
Yeah, because I guess I know. I'm just getting ahead of myself. Okay,
well, no, I was getting ahead of myself because I
know you love the concert album.
The In Concert album is just it's a primal level for me.
Yeah,
there's something that makes me feel so good about that. I wish
And there's a couple songs from Holland that are on In Concert, so we probably should get back to Holland first.
That's good. No,
okay,
that's good.
So
because Holland. Yep.
Rewind.
So opening Holland is Sail On Sailor,
which I mean, what a just great song. I mean, it's probably my favorite. There's another one. That's one that I when I was listening to this album, over and over again, I just the fact that it kicks off with that song is just like, I mean, what a way to set the tone for the album.
Yeah, which it wasn't on the album. Remember when they came back and
Okay,
Warner rejected it? That's when Van Dyke said, "Hey, I've got a tune."
Right. So, but it was on the released album.
Yes.
But initially, when
they came back from Holland, it wasn't on there. And then Van Dyke Park says, "I've got this tune." Gary Beckley from America is on there. There's another singer that's not in the Beach Boys that's from a famous early 70s group, but Carl literally used him on background vocals because either that's who was at the studio that day or something like that. So there's another reason this sounds like a classic 70s rock song that's not by the Beach Boys. The lead vocals by Blondie, who was only a Beach Boy for a couple of years, and then a lot of the background vocals are guys from other bands.
Yeah,
on the released version.
But it was who wrote this song?
Brian
wrote this song.
Brian wrote it with
Van
Dyke Parks. Now the song credits have about 5 guys on it.
Oh wow!
Because there's a guy named Ray Kennedy, but Jack I think gets some song credits on it, and then Tandon Almer, who had written Marcella and maybe even Mess of Help with Brian, gets credit on this. And this Ray Kennedy that hardly anybody knows anything about except for he was in a kind of a 70s super group, and he released his own version of this with slightly different lyrics. There were just some lyric contributions at some times that made it so these guys had to get credit, right? But Van Dyke still said, "Hey, we had most of it done, and I even helped with the music on this one."
Right.
And so just say Brian and Van Dyke. But Brian is not on this record.
But yeah, at all.
I don't think so.
Yeah. So because the reason why I ask is there's that the part after the lyrics sail on sailor, and then it gets into this part that comes after that. Mm-hmm. That's that magical Beach Boy
tag thing.
Yeah, that's just oh man, that part comes on and you just you can't help but bob your head to that specific part. And so that's why I was wondering who wrote it, especially after you saying that there were multiple people on it, because it just had that signature magical just feeling that just makes you move.
Well, and part of that's the feel of it, but we talked about it with Carl and the Passions, and even Surf's Up, even though Brian's considered to be damaged goods and not around a lot of the time, he's still his compositions come across.
Yeah,
man.
Yeah.
It's just they're magical things.
So then we get into Steamboat after that, and so this song actually grew on me. I wasn't at first. It was just one of those ones that the more I listened to it, the more I liked it. Mm-hmm. But who's singing?
Carl.
Okay, that's why I had written down Carl, but I didn't. After you threw the Blondie curveball at me with Sail on Sailor, I didn't know if there was somebody else on there or not. But one of my favorite parts of this song is kind of the I don't know what you'd call it, but it's the acapella bodo bodo. I don't know. I know it's a terrible.
Bodo boom boom.
Yeah,
that's Mike singing those lines.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
just kind of little vocal parts.
Yeah, and that just I don't know, that part just sticks out more in this song, and I don't know, there was a cool feel that brought to it.
I remember when I heard Steamboat the very first time, and I was just the song definitely grew. It's a Dennis tune.
Oh, no
and
kidding.
He wrote it with Jack.
No kidding.
And it's kind of an Americana thing about kind of like Mark Twain and steamboats. It's almost kind of an extension of the Smile sort of idea, not, but that in don't worry, Mr. Fulton, we'll get your steam. That's Robert Fulton, who invented the steamboat, and so that there's kind of a historical aspect to it. But I always love, it's one of, to be honest with you, it's one of my more favorite Dennis works. I prefer it much over Cuddle Up and Make It Good from Carl and the Passions.
Sure. Yeah.
Completely different style. But really cool, funky little track.
So-
It's grown on me a lot over the years.
Something just popped in my head. So did Dennis write more slower tunes than he did upbeat tunes?
But you got Slip On Through from Sunflower,
Yeah.
and It's About Time.
So when he did do
and
the ones that were
and then there's
higher.
some on the late '60s albums too that I need you. We'll have to get you to check out. That he wrote some more upbeat tunes.
Well, and I wasn't paying as close attention to each individual song, and when we were going through
Right.
that the first time. But yeah, I just had that thought. But anything else on Steamboat?
No, just think it's cool. It's the synth. It's a really inventive use of those sounds at the beginning. That's supposed to be a big steamboat, and they figured out how to get all those noises out of that synth.
Yeah.
To bring that to life. So I thought that's a really cool aspect of it.
Yeah, for sure. So then we get into this California Saga thing.
Mm-hmm.
So then we go, I got 1, 2, 3 songs that are California Saga, California Saga with something in parentheses. So this first one being Big Sur, which I love the harmonica on this one. I mean, was there a lot of harmonica use in any of their songs? I was trying to think.
Oh yeah, there's harmonica on Good Vibrations. It's different way. There's some harmonica on Pet Sounds. There's harmonica way back on When I Grow Up.
Maybe it's just I very well could have just missed it, but I didn't know if how the harmonica is used here is more of the style that like I would think a harmonica would be used in. Like I feel like I should be like on the beach around a fire or something with this song.
It's funny that you should say that because this is a Mike Love solo composition.
Interesting.
He wrote this, and he wrote it, he says, on a guitar, with a few chords. There is on the Feel Flows set, and there was a long time ago, there is a version that I need to, the first version of Big Sur that was actually recorded in 1971, I think. And it's better than the Holland version.
Oh,
and it's
really?
in different time. You got to hear it's instead of being in waltz time, it's in common time, and so it changes the feel. But I like this version very much, and I always did. But once I heard the original version of it, that became my favorite. But I still think Mike gets a lot of credit for some great music and some great lyrics all by himself.
Is the original version, you got to hear that on what now? How did you hear that?
Well, it's on the Feel Flows set,
box
but
set?
I heard it on a bootleg years ago.
Gotcha.
Many years ago.
But you can hear it's where you can listen to it. On
Yeah,
the box
and
set.
it was actually, I think it was the very first thing that they dropped from the Feel Flows set.
Oh, okay.
Months before Feel Flows came out. This was and the first time I had ever heard it in that kind of fidelity.
But this isn't Mike singing, is it?
Mm-hmm.
Wow, it doesn't. I thought I had Mike pinned, but apparently not.
You get think of On All I Want to Do, and a lot of other tunes from the early '70s, but even the late '60s. You'll hear Mike singing in what you call like a high tenor voice. He had more range than people
realize
knew.
Yeah. Not that necessarily just that signature Mike sound that people affiliate with him. Sure. So then we get into the Beaks of Eagles, which this is where I don't, not necessarily my thing. So just I don't know. I'll let you take this. What's going on here?
It's taken, I think, it's a famous poet that a lot of this is taken from, and they just set it to music.
Okay,
and it's kind of that hippie 70s culture. Okay, Mike had, I think, already started settling in his Santa Barbara hippie compound. Al had moved up to Big Sur, right? And so that's why all of this stuff the last song of it, California Saga, was his kind of homesick song. Can't wait to get back to California type deal. But the whole thing was a California Saga. They were over in Holland, and they're kind of dreaming about going back to California or trying to do something that encapsulated that. And I don't know if both Mike and Al were into the poet that did a lot of that stuff, but it's another thing that's kind of grown on me, and because I like the songs that bookend it, I'm a lot more apt to listen to Big Sur and California Saga by themselves, though.
Right, right.
Rather than the poetry
Sure.
recited over the music in the middle. But I enjoy listening to that.
Yeah. Well, and then obviously the next one, California, is it's California Girls, but did they change things?
Well, you mean it sounds like California Girls?
Yeah, is that not the California Girls bass line?
It is the California. That's really cool that and it's some of the music is similar, but that's funny that you'd pick that up. That's awesome because that's very much kind of that feel. And this is Al. Al wrote this song, and but the cool thing is, I guess it was right before they were getting ready to come back to California. They weren't getting Brian to do a whole bunch besides the fairy tale while they were over there, but he got Brian to come down and sing that opening line. On my way to sunny California.
Oh, nice. That's Brian.
And if you hear, that's where Brian, you can start to hear kind of like a scratch
change in his
voice. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I didn't, but I guess I thought that was intentional that they used that bass line.
I think that probably.
I mean, people must have heard that and been like, "Oh, this is California Girls bass line."
It's that bass figure is so common in music in other places that I can't say as though I even made the connection early on until somebody pointed it out to me.
Oh,
so it's a boom ba da da dum da da da. It's a kind of it's a country western type deal, horse loping along, and that's why Brian always said that California Girls, when he started that music, he felt like it was kind of like a country western shuffle type boom ba doo doo doom.
I hear that.
And so, I think that you're right. I think that I've even seen places that maybe they made a conscious decision to go ahead and lift that line, directly out of there. But
okay. Well,
it's a cool song.
Well, and that's actually interesting to know that when I heard that, I was like, oh, they decided to, kind of reimagine their,
like they do with tons of other things.
All right. So then the Traders next.
That's side 2.
Okay, so now we're on side 2. And I actually thought about this when I was going through this last night. I'm glad that you say that because you're really taking it back to when you were listening to this on records, where I'm listening to this on Spotify or, YouTube if I can't find it on Spotify. Mm-hmm. So I'm glad that you actually say that when that happens. But so what happened with the Trader?
I think it was side 2.
Yeah, right. Well, hey, in that general area, when I heard the Trader, I was like, oh, this is. I actually thought because of the California Saga, California, that they reimagined a song here too. But what was going on with me is I was like, I know this song. How do I know this song? I know this song. And then I finally realized that this is the song that you played on the Carl album. Mm-hmm. I mean, on the Carl episode.
Right.
And so I went back because every time I listened to it, I was like, I don't know how I know the song. I know it. And then finally, when I sat down and did my final listen, I was like, oh, I hear this on the fiddle right now. And so went back and finally made that connection. But this actually might be my favorite song. I mean,
this is probably it might be my favorite Carl song. And that's after
of all of them.
Long Promise Road, and Field Flows. Yeah, there's something about the Trader that just hits me. The Jack writes the lyrics. The fact that.
Do you say Jack wrote the lyrics? Is that what you said?
Yeah, and it's about the plight of the American Indian. It's about Columbus coming over I like the story that they told on that, and the middle part where the Indians are sad,
Yeah.
And there it is, kind of like a Brian deal. But this is when I know Carl's playing piano on this. I love his piano, and he also on the live in concert he's playing a lot of piano.
Well, in the I love that second part where it gets quiet, and I don't. There's like the quiet.
It soft.
Yeah, and I don't know if they got like brushes or
whatever.
Brushes on the drums.
And,
yeah. But that part is, that there's just something about the movement of this song that it just it's one of those ones that makes you,
I think I've seen a quote from Carney too, where she says that this one, there's a solo tune that I don't know if I've introduced you to of Carl's from later on called Heaven, but she said, this and the Trader for Carl.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I know there's a lot of people who have a lot of fondness for the Trader. The Trader is classic 70s rock too.
Yeah. No, I totally had that feel. One of those that had that feel in this album. Um, so leaving this town, who is this?
Well, good. Well, it doesn't really sound too much like the Beach Boys again,
No,
does it?
so it's got to be Blondie.
Ricky and Blondie.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, it's their tune.
Okay, so
I do. Now they did. I think Mike helped out a little bit lyrically on this, and maybe Carl's credited on it also. But this is, one of theirs primarily. And
yeah, and kind of has a different feel. And yeah, this one definitely felt 70s though to me as well. Like kind of some trippy-ish sort of feel to it. That's kind of the vibe that I was getting. It's not. It was okay. I didn't like love the song, but but I thought it was fitting. I thought it absolutely fit with
fits
everything.
the record.
Yeah,
I think it does too.
Only with You.
Ooh, see, I almost forget that's on there sometimes, but this is the classic. This is Dennis's music, and cousin Mike wrote the lyrics, and this is one of those examples that even, they'd already had some issues by then, but they did some amazing work together.
Yeah,
I mean, this is one of Dennis's greatest. This to me is like one of the ultimate. Why this didn't turn into an ultimate wedding song.
Exactly.
I don't know what would be.
That's literally what I wrote down. I was like, I mean, if you're gonna have a song that makes you think about that special someone, this is the song.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the song. Like,
yeah. And Carl singing again. So
yeah, and I had Carl written down actually, but that's just funny. Yeah, I literally was like, this is just a great love jam, slow, good. Yeah, like, I mean, how is this not played at every wedding during that time?
Or why why didn't it resonate more? And why to me, I look at something like that and I think, wow, that's got pretty widespread commercial appeal too. The music is pretty accessible. It's something that non-musicians, I feel like, could pick up. Obviously, I mean, I don't classify you as a complete non-musician because you've got an amazing set of ears.
Yeah, but, I mean, that's all I got. I can bang on some drums, kind of. So, but no, that song. I mean, that one will emotionally get you going when it comes.
It's just a great tune.
The love aspect, for sure. But let's get into something a little more fun, the Funky Pretty.
Yeah.
And I want to meet this girl, whoever they're singing about.
A Pisces lady.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think is it Brian and Jack and Mike that maybe get, but this is Brian's music. And part of this was, I think I read an interview of Al talking about before they went to Holland, Brian had a tune called Spark in the Dark. Which, you got the middle section that goes, "Where's my spark in the dark?"
Yeah, yeah.
And so he probably had that part of it, and then they built the rest of it over, who knows. But it's always been one of my, I love this song, and I love all the lyrics.
Yeah.
This is Riley, and I think Mike's credited on this too. I need to check it out. But it's just another one of those tunes that very few people even know of, when they for Beach Boys tune. But I love in Long Promise Road when Jason and Brian are in the car talking a little bit about Holland, and Brian looks and goes, "Funky Pretty." You're kind of like, one more, hey, that was on that record.
Yeah. No, and it has a nice fitting 70s feel to it. And it's also one of those Beach Boys songs that has just had a lot going on. Like, I listen to it and I'm just like pushing the headphones closer to my ears, trying to really hear everything. There's just a lot going on that I want to.
The vocal is rotated through. Al sings part of it. Carl, Blondie, Mike. It's like one of those, like, add some music from some where it's like it's not, it's rotated around, and then they've got tons of little. Almost what I would call seabird sounds that they found on the beep, 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 all these weird things that just kids in a candy store playing with that synthesizer,
right? All right, then Mount Vernon and Fairway. So
this is okay. So you've seen this in the 70s room. This was a little. the little 10-inch record that was put in the package. It wasn't on the album proper. Okay, so Funky Pretty would have been the end of it, but then this was included as an extra thing, and it's because I think when Brian says in Long Promised Road how much Carl loved the fairy tale, but I've also seen article from that time period that when Brian first presented the fairy tale to Carl, he went, "What?"
Yeah, I don't blame him. Yeah,
and but then Carl helped write at least a little bit of the music on it, and that's the obviously Jack Riley's narrating the
I picked up on that,
but Brian's doing the weird voices.
Oh yeah, which the weird voices, and I think we can kind of talk about all these as a group here. I laughed when the little weird voices came on it.
Oh, me
It reminded
too.
me of like South Park, honestly. My generation stuff of like a South Park character, like this guy joking.
That I'd showed you the sleeve that came in. Brian drew that himself. The sleeve, it's a kind of a cartoon drawing of a magic transistor radio. And that's how he, you got to think of. That was important to him back. He goes, I'm gonna write this funky little fairy tale, and I'm even gonna draw the sleeve on it.
I didn't mind the fairy tale of in itself, but when I'm listening to an album, I'm not into stuff like this or like narrating. That's why Beaks or the Beaks of Eagles, like that. The narrating part of those things, that's not what I want when I'm listening to music to an album. But I like that they put that on the end.
Well, it wasn't even on the album.
On there proper. Right.
If you were getting this record in the 70s, you probably never even listened to that.
Okay, so then this probably wouldn't. Do you know?
Sorry, folks, I didn't really mean that. I would have been in a lot of other people, but a lot of people would have given it a pass and said, what, I'm just putting on the regular record.
Yes, exactly. Okay, but that's good to know. That's actually good to know because that's my thoughts on these sort of things where it's just like that's not really. And they're not the only band to do it, but but whenever I come across stuff narrating sort of stuff, and I get it for like an artistic sort of story within an album, but for me, I'm just like I just want the music.
I think about that whole Holland fiasco, and this just had to been the icing on the cake. Okay, we gotta put this thing. Okay, let's include it as a little separate record, and because you don't want to hurt Brian's feelings, and you don't want to, if he's trying, who knows what all was the considerations were, but
hey, if he's gonna do anything, let's let him know. Yeah, totally. I get it.
But then to say, well, okay, we don't maybe not put this on the record, but that's good. Anyway, we could put a little tiny record in there with it,
Yeah. Okay, so that's Holland.
And we had to go back and address that.
No, I'm glad you did, because now we can get into the concert album.
Well, we talked about the process for Holland in the previous episode, and I guess that was making me think we'd already talked about the music, but it's important to talk about that music.
Yeah, especially, let's keep it chronological, and so then now the in-concert album. And so January, the Holland comes out. Mm-hmm. In-concert comes out when?
November.
Probably, got it. Okay. Yeah. So I don't have, notes on every song. I just put down, things that caught my attention. And the first thing, and so, if you want to, interject any moment on, you probably know the lineup better than I do. But the first thing overall is like, and maybe it's just the remastered version that I listened to, but it is so clean for a live album. Like it is like you can hear everything really, really well. So that was one thing I noticed, like, overall. And then getting into the tracks, this is probably my favorite version of Sloop John B. I'm not really a Sloop John B fan. Mm-hmm. And so I really, for whatever reason, this version hit it for me. And then You Still Believe in Me, that was one of the first ones where, like, how clean the album was sounding really started to, like, set in, because I was just like, wow, like, the quality sounds so good, and I guess I don't know if that's a remastered thing or not.
I think it's another byproduct of people weren't yet fanatical at Beach Boy concert. Some people were, but there's on some of those quieter tunes, you got an audience that's cooperating.
That's quiet.
Right? Yeah, right, exactly.
Okay. So then now let's get into Marcella. Whew. I mean, you had mentioned this, and but you want to talk about a whole new appreciation for that song. Like, I think it's one of those songs that 100%, if I heard it live, like, it's okay, but then you hear it live, you're like, oh my God, this song is so good. And because of that, when you listen to the record, you make the connection from the live version, and all of a sudden you have a whole new love for the song itself. But that, I mean,
they kick ass on that thing. That's the really what I love. This is a special at the end of side 1 is a special. That California Girls and the dirty guitars, just compared to what the soft symphonic, but they got distortion on the guitars and just the same deal, just the power of that. And Dennis, you can hear him saying, "This is for the girl who brought me here tonight."
I heard him say that actually.
So, and during this whole concert, Dennis is the only one. He's on the cover.
Yeah, he's on the cover.
Only one on the cover. But since he's hurt his hand, he's a kind of up prowling the front of the stage the whole time and singing and being the sex symbol, right?
Yeah.
So that's another thing you have to picture in your mind is Dennis up front on all this stuff and before Surfing USA, this is for all the surfers here tonight.
I heard.
But he says at the very end of California Girls, or no, it's You Still Believe in Me. He's Alan Jardine. He's got some of the MC handling some of the stage
totally
banter and everything like. But that version of Darlin' and Paul Williams, famous Beach Boy writer. I'm not sure if he's still with us, but he often talks about when the CD re-release came out of this. He says the most magical moment wasn't even on the original vinyl because Darlin' was the last song on side 1 and Marcella was the first song on side 2, and the new CD has Darlin'. It is edited so beautifully, and they go out of Darlin' into that Marcella just so, and that because God, that's the best moment of the entire album is out of Darlin' into Marcella, and it wasn't even there on the original record,
Yeah, and the only reason I didn't write Darlin' down is because I just love that song in all forms. It's just.
Carl always does a beautiful job of it, and always had a slightly different way of singing it through the years.
That's the other thing too. Is like, God, I mean, how well he sings that song is just, man, it's just mind blowing. And I think Marcella might be the best live version of any, for my opinion, might be the best version of any of these live versions for me. Mm-hmm. Also Funky Pretty, though.
Oh, yeah.
Funky Pretty live, like, oh, my God. Like, this is that bass line like we talked about. And then, just how I talk about how that song has a lot going on in it. And then you can hear it, like, once again, I'm, live version, I'm pushing the headphones in my ear. So it's like, I want to hear all the stuff that's going on. There's just so much going on. So, I mean, I think
I love that, too. I agree with you completely. Those two tunes were brought out. The rock and roll essence of those tunes was brought out on that live record. That just the guts of some of that wasn't present in the studio versions of those songs.
Exactly. And having messed around recording Friends, ever since I was 13 years old. I remember that being a thing, which is like not being able to catch what they could do live, even though at the much more amateur level. But and this is kind of shows that even back then, not being able to capture what this song is live, in a studio. But hey, but then they make an album like this and you get to see it all. So anyway, I'm kind of moving through these a lot. Are there any that?
There's a ton of them. I mean, I love the Caroline No on that side too, and I like when Carl says, "Hey, shut up, you guys!" right before he starts to sing it, and everybody guesses as to who he's. Some people think he's talking to the audience, which he could have been. Maybe they were, but he also some of the backing musicians might have been talking. That's what I always thought about it because I hear that on stage all the time, sometimes with band leaders or even myself. Hey, quiet. You know?
Yeah. And Carl's demeanor, that doesn't think that would make more sense that he would be saying that to them, or do you think it makes more sense to be saying that to the crowd? I mean, crowds can
Maybe
be
both.
unruly
I've heard
sometimes.
him chastise.
Yeah, crowds
when
can be
he had,
unruly for sure.
So, but he sings it beautifully on there, and he's I don't know if he's playing acoustic guitar on this, but there was a time when he'd do Caroline No just kind of by himself out on a stool with just an acoustic guitar in concert. Cool. Then of course Funky Pretty, but then on that side 3, which Funky Pretty opens, then I mean that version of that Let the Wind Blow, which is from Wild Honey, and that's Carl turned that into. That's a much more powerful track than it is on the album.
And I'm not familiar with that track from the album because I didn't really listen to Wild Honey intently, and so I didn't really, I mean, it's a good song, but I didn't have any, sort of, point of reference with it.
Yeah, but then side 3, you got carries out with the new.
Wait, so side 3.
Yeah, there were 4. There was a double album. This is a double album. So you got side 1, side 2, side 3.
Okay.
Started with Funky Pretty, then I think Let the Wind Blow, and then you've got the new funky version of Help Me Rhonda.
Yeah. And is that bass line the same bass line? Or is it
no,
it's a totally different bass line?
Then especially from the hit version.
Okay. I think
you Summer Days.
Yeah.
We already talked about that Help Me Rhonda, so we could probably go to. I love this version of Surfer Girl.
Yeah.
And it's also, you get to, Al's singing almost all the falsetto parts on this entire album. So all the real high voices you hear are Al.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so the top voice here, and then and I love the way Mike introduces this, and it always struck me as strange even when I was little and I didn't have any contacts with it. He goes, "For all you oldies but moldies fans," kind of like he's a stoner, but he never really was.
Yeah.
"For all you oldies but moldies fans, we're gonna do one of the first 2 or 3 songs we ever recorded." Like it's 8, and this is 1972 or 3.
Yeah.
And they're talking about 1962.
Yeah.
Or whatever. And the words to this song were found in a tablet in a field in Hawthorne, California. That's how old it is.
Yeah.
And they go right into it, and it is. It's a great live version of Surfer Girl. They sing their asses off on it. But coming out of that baby into You Already Know Wouldn't It Be Nice is one of my all-time. That live version on that I sometimes will go listen to that. If I've got something to do, if I got a show to play downtown or something like that, and I want to get kind of jacked or something, I'll put on the In Concert album, and I'll go to that section of Surfer Girl and Wouldn't It Be Nice, and it's probably, I love this version of Wouldn't It Be Nice.
Yeah, it's a good one. In fact, all of these early tunes that they did in this album, I love the version that they do on them. I mean, I literally, I just kind of wrote a blanket note for all of them that I just loved all these different little twists that they did on these versions of these classic Beach Boys songs.
Yeah, well, but
they weren't classic at the time, but for me,
Pet Sounds was 60. This was 5 years after, 6 years after Pet Sounds, right? So really in our world, that's yesterday.
Yeah, right.
Right.
Yeah.
The side 4 starts off with a tune that got left off Holland. So the only official release of it is on the concert album. It's a song called We Got Love. We got love.
Yeah.
We got love. That was recorded in Holland, I think, and it's mainly a Ricky and Blondie tune, but Mike helped out with it too, and maybe somebody else. I'm not sure of the writing credit on that, but I know it's mainly Ricky and Blondie. So that's kind of, I can't say that's my favorite part of the album.
Yeah,
that right there. But right after that, they get into such a different little vibe and a different way of handling the vocals on the front of it than is what on the record. But Don't Worry, Baby.
Yeah.
And you got Al singing the verses, and then it shifts to Carl singing the choruses on that one. I just think I love the way they do that one on there. And then right out of that to Dennis saying, this one's for all the surfers here tonight. And then Carl on his original lick that he played on the thing, but on a heavily distorted 70s guitar, he gives out that same famous lick to Surfing USA.
Yeah.
And I think it's a pretty I love, oh man, Ed's lines on the bass on this, they stand out here because he plays on all the old tunes. I mean, he really, I don't know how much of that they built into the arrangement or how much of it was just his amazing musicianship, but he definitely, on something like this that was pretty basic on the original, he added elements made it so much more rocking in parts,
Yeah, no, for sure. I like that, like you said, that was consistent throughout the whole thing. It was his. And so then how long did, and maybe we're going to get into this in future episodes, but how long was he playing bass for them after this then?
Long time. Even up until last week with Al.
Right, but I didn't know if that was like
the Beach
a
Boys
return
band.
of him.
No, Ed was, I'm almost positive Bruce brought Ed Carter in.
Oh, really?
And Ed Carter was in the late 60s, I think 68.
Okay. And
then he was in until 2000s maybe.
Oh, wow.
Sometimes in but a big, most of the time he's that bass player, I guess. No, in the 90s Chris Farmer was playing bass, maybe up through the early 90s or something, but through the like all the 70s and everything. He was a big part of the Beach Boys sound on stage. And so the last two tunes on side 4 are famous Beach Boy closers, Good Vibrations and Fun
Mm-hmm.
I've got that set list that I got from when I ran sound for that show in the early 2000s, and where it says fun, 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 it says fun, fun, done. Meaning it's in, no more encores after this tune. It's fun, fun, done. But it's a rockin', again,
great album.
Really cool, and it went gold.
Oh, wow.
So this is the first one of the records that they've done for the new company that actually goes gold. There were some things that came out at the time that said because it was a double album and it was sold at kind of not a real double album price, that it wasn't a real gold record or something. But it was a gold record, and Carl Wilson deserves a lot of credit. I think that record had more impact at the time than people even thought. This was before the big Endless Summer resurgence that would happen the next year.
Okay.
But I think everything that had happened from 1971 with Jack coming in and moving them in the new direction and getting the new music going, and this is a culmination of that period, I feel like.
Okay.
But it sold well enough to where I'm sure that the Beach Boys would have had some sort of resurgence without Endless Summer anyway, because of all this work that they'd done up to then. But then the next year, Endless Summer just blows the door wide open for them. And it forever changes everything, but we'll talk about that.
Yeah, so next time, in the next step, is there anything else that we need to cover on this one?
Okay, so
before we
Blondie,
wrap this up?
Blondie leaves the group after officially joining in early 72.
Okay.
So that's not very long.
Not long.
Not long. He famously got into an argument at a concert, I think at Madison Square Garden, with Steve Love, the new manager. I guess maybe Blondie wanted some people to be added to the ticket list or something. I shouldn't be. Some of the stuff I know that I've seen, and maybe
it's not substantiated though.
Well, God, the fact that it's in books.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Well, hey, no, I'm curious. We don't have to, put a guarantee on this, but what were you saying? Like that
they just got into some sort of a even physical altercation backstage, and where Blondie was basically fired after that. But I think Blondie was looking for an exit, and as we'll find out the next year, Ricky Fattar makes his exit too. So, probably for a lot of reasons, but that period of actually, they are actually in earlier than that. They just weren't official Beach Boys in 71. But for most of 71, 72, and 73, you had those guys being a huge influence, even to the point of, I remember when you were listening to Carl and the Passions. You were saying, loving Here She Comes.
Yeah.
And I said, well, that's not even the Beach Boys.
Yeah, yeah. Love their music, though.
Yeah. So they were... They were a part of that big beefy sound that I love from my favorite live period of the Beach Boys.
Yeah.
So that's a special little period. This is kind of the end of that little period,
and so now we can move on to where we're going in the next episode.
Yeah.
So Endless Summer? You've mentioned the Endless Summer numerous times that, since I've been doing this with you. So this is going to be in 74?
74, and we'll just save it to talk about it then, but we're going to...
So what's my homework for 74 then?
Well, I'll talk to you about it
later.
Because there's not a lot of new music going on, except for maybe something called The Child of Winter.
Okay.
And so, but
we'll get into that?
No, not really. It's not worth getting into. But
Okay.
I think I mentioned to you for 2 years where they really didn't put out any new music in 74 and 75 is really probably the most pivotal period of their career because of all of the hugely successful compilations that came out at that point.
Okay.
And we'll get into talking about, but I really feel like this is the moment when they went from being what they were to legendary.
Legends, yeah.
Legendary.
Yeah.
Legendary. Would forever be cemented.
Very cool. Okay, well, if that's going to do it for this episode, we thank you all for listening, and make sure you do all the things that help us: subscribe, like, share, help us spread the Beach Boys word, and we will see you in the next episode. Thanks for listening.